Welcome back. You ready to tackle challenge 3? Let's dive into it. Now we're going to talk about creating and using loops. Again, loops can be a little complicated, so I really encourage you to check out the pre-course videos because what I'm going to do now is going to kind of maybe only scratch the surface. So let's dive into it and get to work on loops. So I want to write a loop to log the numbers, which remember the word log means just print to the console, the numbers 25 through 50. Well, let me show you some of the snippets and helpers that your code will give you to do that. So I'm going to actually start by writing out, caps lock's on for me, 4. And we'll see here I have a couple of options. Before I hit space, because as soon as you hit space, that all goes away. So as I'm in here, I type FOR, and I have these options showing up for me of several options. Well, I want to start with a for loop, just a standard for loop. Can you do a for each? Sure. Could you do a for in, for of, all these things? Yes, in a roundabout sort of way. But I would encourage you to keep it simple with the standard for loop. Now, I'm going to get a bunch of stuff come up here, and it's like, wow, that's a lot. That can be overwhelming. And truthfully, this first iteration of the for loop writing, this isn't super helpful, but it does get some of that syntax out for you. Now, before I've typed anything or touched anything or clicked anything, notice that all of the instances of the word index are highlighted. What that means is my cursor, as soon as I start to type, will actually change all of those. So I'm just going to hit I and change my for loop variable to just the simple I. Now I'm going to hit tab, and it would give me the option to select array. In this case, I'm not iterating over an array. I'm just writing my loop to go over a certain series of numbers. So array is not super helpful to me here, so I'm just going to backspace it out. I'm going to hit tab again, and it says, okay, what is the element you're wishing to iterate over? And again, we're not using an array here, so I'm going to tab out of that. So this first snippet on this very first challenge, not as beneficial as it will be on the very next one, and you'll kind of see how that comes out to play there. So here I'm going to say, all right, I need to change a few things. Dot length, well, the red underline tells me this is not even a thing, so I'm going to go ahead and erase it. And I don't really need this const element. So right now I'm going to say, all right, I'm starting at 0, and I'm going as long as I is less than what? Well, in this case, I want to go through 25 through 50. So I'm going to say, as long as I is less than 51, I'm going to keep iterating. Now, that said, remember, less than is an important here difference between less than or less than and equal to. If I say less than or equal to, the statement is still true that I is less than or equal to 51. If I say it would include 51, here it says it will include 50, but as soon as I becomes 50, 50 is not less than 50, and therefore the loop would end. The other thing to be aware of is I want to start at 25. Well, my starting variable I set to 0. So this is an easy enough change to say I is 25. I start here. I check, is I less than 51? Well, on a first initialization, it'll be 25. So say that's true, run the code. After the code is run, it comes back around, I++, which we remember increases the value of I by 1. Then it checks it again. At that point in memory, I would be 26 if it was our second iteration. 26 is less than 51, so it does it again and again and again and again until eventually I was 49. It increases to 50. 50 is less than 51, runs the code. I becomes 51. 51 is not less than 51, and the loop ends, continuing after whatever's line 25. So with that said, we remember that we want to log, so I'm going to simply say log. And the thing I want to print is the actual value of I, because I will be 25 on the first iteration, 26, 27, etc., until we get up to 51. So let's save it, check our console, refresh, and I get out 25 through 50. All right, nice. We got that one done and done. Now there's an extension on this that says log only the numbers that are multiples of 5. Multiples is always going to be a key word that will tell you what you want to use here is a little thing called modulus. So modulus, which is represented in code by the percent sign, essentially says, hey, I want to get the remainder of unequal division. So we'll put a little note for ourselves, remainder of unequal division. Okay? And if you haven't used that yet, the double forward slash is how we create comments. It means this is not code, just ignore it. This is for me as the person to read, not the computer. So what that remainder of unequal division is, once upon a time in elementary school, your teacher might have asked you to say, hey, what is, 10 divided by 9? And you didn't know what a decimal was, or a fraction for that matter. So you might have said, well, that's 1 remainder 1. That remainder 1, that is modulus. So essentially, the equivalent here is saying 10, and I actually have to switch these around when I'm using modulus. 10 modulus 9 would be equal to 1. Okay. Now in JavaScript, we don't want to use the single equals because that's assignment, so I'll use double equals because that's our equality. I also have font ligatures turned on, so if you notice when you're watching my code, your code doesn't, it still leaves like a little tiny space between the equal signs, and if I do a triple equals, it actually creates 3 lines. That's a setting in VS Code called font ligatures. It just is a syntactic sugar, makes it look cool. It doesn't actually change the functionality, so I'll try and make sure to call those out as I use them. You might have seen it earlier with the less than or equal to. So that said, I modulus 9 is 1. So what that tells us is if a number divided by another number has a remainder. Well, if you think about a multiple means it divides evenly into that number. So we can infer from that that if I divide the number by modulus 5, it should have 0 remainder. Also, if you're ever reading this out to yourself and you say, well, log only the numbers that are multiples of 5, and I say, okay, well, I need to log it if it's 5. Well, I've just given myself the first clue of what I need to do. If it's 5. If is, of course, our conditional statement that says, hey, if a value is resolved to be true in the if statement, perform the action in the curly braces. Well, I'm going to go ahead and pull that console log up because I want to say, hey, only print the numbers if they're a multiple of 5. So how could I use modulus, this little thing that says here's the remainder, to only print the numbers that are multiples of 5? Well, as I look in here, I'm going to say, all right, well, if the number I'm on, well, what's the number I'm on? If you remember the first challenge that we solved here, it was I. I is the numbers 25 through 50 when we printed it out. So if that number is a multiple of 5, as in I divide by 5 and the remainder is equal to 0. So if I divide a number by 5, there's no remainder, this side will resolve to 0. Does 0 equal 0? If it does, print. If this was, for example, 2, 2 does not divide evenly into 5, so it would be a remainder of 2. And it'll ask, does 2 equal 0? No, so it'll jump to the next line. So let's save this and test it. So now I get 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. Perfect. Only the multiples of 5 between 25 and 50. So that gets us done for section 3.